the world often feels less like a straight line and more like a circle. Every generation believes it is witnessing something entirely new: new leaders, new conflicts, new promises of change. Yet when people look closely, they sometimes see familiar patterns repeating beneath different names and different flags. Some religious and spiritual traditions interpret these patterns through the idea that history carries memory, not necessarily through literal repetition but through recurring human tendencies: ambition, fear, pride, loyalty, and the desire for power. Within this worldview, the greatest danger is not open opposition but hypocrisy. The hypocrite is not the person who openly rejects ideals. Rather, it is the person who speaks in the language of justice while acting in service of self-interest. Sacred texts across traditions warn that deception ultimately turns inward. A person may imagine they are manipulating others, controlling outcomes, or escaping consequences, yet their actions slowly shape their own future. This idea appears in many forms throughout human culture. Some call it divine justice, others call it cause and effect. Some describe it as karma. The language changes, but the principle remains familiar: actions leave traces. According to this perspective, consequences are not always immediate. Sometimes they unfold across years, sometimes across generations. Sometimes they appear as repeated social patterns rather than direct punishments. History becomes a mirror. Empires rise with promises of stability and greatness. They create symbols, monuments, institutions, and stories about themselves. Yet over time, many begin to resemble the powers they once claimed to replace. Ancient rulers justified expansion as necessity. Modern governments justify intervention as security. Dynasties defended inheritance through bloodlines. Contemporary systems defend continuity through influence and structure. The forms evolve, the dynamics remain recognizable. Those who hold power rarely describe themselves as conquerors. They speak instead of order, progress, protection, and unity. Their language often sounds noble. Their outcomes are left for history to judge. Viewed through this lens, politics becomes less about individuals and more about recurring roles. There is the ruler who seeks permanence, the rival who believes authority belongs to them, the reformer who becomes attached to control, the strategist who presents compromise while preserving influence, the figure who speaks of justice while quietly fearing change. Whether one understands these patterns spiritually, psychologically, or historically, they appear again and again. People project hope onto leaders, leaders project certainty onto people. Entire societies become invested in symbols of strength, yet symbols alone do not transform reality. No throne lasts forever, no movement remains untouched, no image survives unchanged. Eventually every generation discovers that appearances alone cannot sustain power, and so history moves, not in perfect circles but in rhythms, periods of certainty followed by uncertainty, expansion followed by collapse, darkness followed by renewal. This interpretation of history ultimately arrives at a hopeful conclusion, that no structure built entirely on fear or deception can endure indefinitely. What remains after every cycle is the same question: will humanity repeat old patterns or finally recognize them? The answer is never hidden in the past, it is always decided in the present.